Okay, um, you probably can't see my head because it's camouflaged. Uh, this is chapter 15, brain and cranial nerves. This is going to be about 75, 77 slides, so it's going to be long. Bear with me. You can always stop it. Excuse me, take a break, walk around, get the blood moving. Think about me, I've got to do this whole thing. So I'm going to do is what we've always done before. I'm going to go through slide by slide, tell you what's important. The only problem is being on a video, I can't hear your questions immediately. So you do have questions. Remember, there's SI that Brooke is doing and tutoring online. If that doesn't work, get a hold of me or her on email, and we'll try and resolve your issues. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to move the picture up just a little bit. There you go. Like the hat. Hey, this is getting boring, huh, you guys? Don't you wish you could get out? Anyway, here we go. Cranial nerves, outline. Remember, we always start with the outline. What are you guys going to get? Well, we're going to talk about support protection of the brain. Remember, we've talked about this before. We've said if something is important for your survival as a species or an individual, we put a protective sac around it. We saw this with the heart. We saw it with the lungs. We saw it with the viscera. Brain is pretty important. So we're going to put a sac around it. We're going to call that sac meninges, and 3 layers instead of the normal 2. Okay. The other thing is we're going to take that sac and we're going to put a fluid in between one of those layers to give it buoyancy and nutrition. And since it's really, really important for our survival, we're going to put bone around it. Remember the central nervous system was a tree trunk with the canopy on top of it. Okay, the canopy is the brain. The trunk is the spinal cord. The bone that goes around it is the vertebral column around the trunk, and the skull around the leaves. Okay. There's 5 lobes. You probably learned it as 4 lobes to the brain: the cerebrum, the diencephalon, which is inside of that, the brain stem, which is where the spinal cord kind of opens up into the brain. And then the last one, the second largest part of the brain, is the cerebellum. Just for understanding, we call the cerebrum the conscious part of the brain. That's the one where we do our thinking and make decisions and cause motor responses. The diencephalon pretty much is hormones. Okay, our hormones, the pituitary, the pineal gland, so forth. Brainstem is kind of like a transfer place where incoming sensory messages are sent to places of the brain where they'll have the decision-making process or storage there. It also is the respiratory and cardiac center. The cerebellum, the second largest part of the brain, is at the base and the back. And I call that the cat part of the brain because that's involved in fine motor control, posture and fine motor control. Picture a cat walking on a fence. Fence is only this wide, but the cat's able to walk on that because it has a very developed cerebellum. Okay. The limbic system, I call this the Hollywood system. The limbic system is, and I call it the Hollywood system because if you think about it, when you see a movie, they've already got it figured out, the emotions they want to elicit from you. So if they want you to get all pumped up and stuff, they're going to show bombs exploding, real light backgrounds, loud music, and so forth, and you feel yourself, your heart rate go up, your respiratory rate go up, and so forth. They want you to cry, they do just the opposite. They dim the lights, they have mute colors, talk softly, and you hear soft music in the background. Next thing you know, you're crying. Okay? That's because instead of just one part of the brain, they use numerous parts of the brain and nuclei. Remember what nuclei are? Ganglia. Okay, clusters of ganglia, and they use the sense of smell, sense of hearing, the temporal lobes, the occipital lobe for vision and so forth. They put all those together, and they can get you to do what they want. Okay. I'm gonna have to move this thing here. Hold on. Oh, and then the last thing we'll talk about is the cranial nerves. We have 12 pair of cranial nerves that come right out of the brain. Now they're still the peripheral nervous system. So they go and they control the body, different parts of the body. Usually it's the shoulders up. There is one that goes down to the diaphragm, but it's the shoulders up. The spinal nerves are the ones that control the rest of the body. Anyway, that's the last thing we'll talk about. I don't know what happened here. Here we go. Nope, that didn't work either. Let's try this. That did. Okay, 4 divisions of the brain. When we look at a brain, or we close our eyes and we imagine a brain, we see all those rises and falls and stuff around there. Those are called convolutions. That part of the brain, the outer part of the brain, is why you're listening to this video, and I'm able to record it for you. It's the conscious part of the brain. And humans have the best developed cerebrum. It's the most developed. So if we go back evolutionarily back to reptiles and fish and stuff like that, they don't even have a cerebrum, or a very, very small one, because they can't make conscious decisions. They can't say, hey, I think I'm going to bite that bait. Oh no, there might be a fisherman up there with a pole. They can't do that. There's no reasoning to it. Do you understand? We do have that developed, and it was called directional evolution. That's why we shot off and became, I guess, the top of the pyramid, if you want to believe that, because we can make those decisions. We're the only species that can actually examine our own brain. Think about it that way. That's kind of heavy, huh? Anyway, the cerebrum, okay, the conscious part of the brain, the part we see, if you took the cerebrum and split it, and we'll do that in a picture, you'll see an inside little brain in there. That the diencephalon, the pons, the medulla, so on and so forth, the midbrain. And then off the back, we see kind of like a cauliflower coming off the back of the brain down below, inferior, and that is the cerebellum. So the way to remember this, the cerebrum, pretty much conscious part of the brain. Diencephalon, pretty much hormones. Brainstem, respiratory cardiac center, and it's a switching station. You're going to see it's going to call the pyramids, okay? And the cerebellum, the cat part of the brain. Fine motor control. There we go. Here we go. So we're going to do the cerebrum first. Best thing to do, show you a picture. No. We'll talk about what you see. Okay. The convolutions, the rises and falls. One rise and fall is called a convolution. Do you remember in the digestive intestine? Sorry, the intestine, the small and large intestine, especially the large intestine. We had a rise and fall, and we call it a haustra. Same kind of thing, only it's called a convolution, and it's to increase surface area. Because on the outside of those convolutions are where cell bodies are at. And you know that the cell bodies do everything. Cell bodies do everything, okay? So that's where your ribosomes are, and your smooth ER, and your rough ER, and all that other stuff. Stretched off of that is your axon and dendrite. So the convolutions where everything happens, so you want to have the most surface area for your convolutions. The way the brain works is it puts the cell bodies on the outside and runs the arms, which are the axons and dendrites, down deep so they can connect. So they connect down deep, but the storage places are on the outside, which is going to be gray matter. So we're going to find that in the brain, the gray matter is on the outside, the white matter is towards the center. There you go. The top part, remember in a haustra, the top part, the rise part, was called a diverticula. Okay, here it's called a gyri or gyrus, depending if you're single or plural. Okay, sulci, easy way to remember it. When you sulk, the corners of your mouth go down. So the rise is called a gyrus. The down part is called a sulcus. And you're going to find that deep sulci are called fissures. Okay, because we stand upright, we have to change a little bit of our directional term. In other words, if you were a dog and you're looking and you're walking, the top part of your head would be anterior. Superior would be up, inferior would be down. But since we walk upright, we got to change those terms. So what we do is we throw them away And we talk about anterior, so the front part of the brain is has a different name. It's called rostral, rostral. Tail end still applies. Tail is what? Caudal. Yeah. So rostral is the front part. Tail is the caudal part. Okay. And we still have superior and inferior. So rostral is anterior. Caudal is posterior. There you go. There you go. Now, did you add that extra term up here? Fissure? F-I-S-S-U-R-E? Bet you didn't. Okay. Here we go. Now we got the picture. When we think of a brain, that's what we think of human brain, correct? Okay, this is rostral. This is caudal. And if you see the dotted line, look real careful, see the dotted line. Okay, here is 4 of the 5 lobes. This great, big, huge one right here is called the frontal lobe. Remember the frontal bone? That's about where that sucker's at too, okay? And this is mostly motor. Okay, sometimes it's called premotor, sometimes it's called motor. We're also going to see that some of our reasoning goes on here. Okay, if some of you do have any reasoning. This is the parietal lobe. This is the sensory lobe. So we have motor is frontal, parietal is sensory. Occipital, which is in the very back, occipital is vision, and temporal lobe is hearing. Pretty much. Now, if we peel this temporal lobe away, buried inside is the 5th one you may or may not know, and that's called insula, I-N-S-U-L-A. Here's the brain stem. Here's the brain stem, and it consists of, you don't see it, there's a hook part right here. There's a hook part called the midbrain. This is the pons, this is the medulla. About right here is the foramen magnum. Remember that in the bone? What'd you just do? Let's go back. And then this is the cat part of the brain. You notice how he has these little folds? Just a minute. There we go. See how he has these little folds? Okay, they kind of are like miniature convolutions. And we don't call them convolutions, we call them folia, F-O-L-I-A. And I'll get to that and remind you later. But you can see this is the second largest part of the brain. All right. Okay, here's an actual dissected brain. Looks a lot like that, like the other one, okay, but it's a little more rugged looking because when we draw it, we can make it nice and pretty. Yeah. Now, it looks like this is nice and firm, kind of like an uncooked steak or something. And in a preserved brain, yes, it is. But in a real life brain, this is mush. And if you take away the meninges, this will just be like applesauce. We dissected one a couple of semesters ago, a pig brain, and it didn't go well because I accidentally tore the meninges. Okay, here's what it looks like from the bottom. Meantime, your eye caught the first thing, yeah. These gold things are your cranial nerves. Number 1 cranial nerve is olfactory. See it? Olfactory, that's number 1. Number 2 is ocular. Number 3 is ocular motor. And then this is number 5. And 5 is, just a minute, is trigeminal, and so on and so forth. You can see most of them come off the brain stem. See that? Most of them come off the brain stem. I'll do this for you in the very end because you're going to have to memorize these. And I'll give you a little mnemonic for that. Okay, human brain, there's one that's dissected. You see it's not quite as pretty. Still has the same parts. Okay, now we're going to take and we're going to do remember a sagittal plane, the one that cuts you right in half? And if it cuts you exactly in half, it was called mid-sagittal. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that brain and we're going to do a mid-sagittal cut. We're going to cut right through the corpus callosum. And I'll tell you in a minute, the corpus callosum is a tract. And then we're going to split it and we're going to look at it with a sagittal view. Remember how we did the bones? Okay, there you go. Okay, still rostral, caudal, superior, inferior. Now we see the brain stem. Remember the foramen magnum is about right here. This is the medulla. This is the pons. Remember the pons? Remember the hook part of the brain I said is called the midbrain? That's the hook part, not this part. This is the hook part. So it goes medulla, pons, midbrain. The one I said looked like a piece of cauliflower or broccoli or whatever you want to make it look like. But to me, it made it look like your feet. But anyway, this is called the cerebellum, second largest part of the brain, the fovea. Okay, this is all cerebrum. Wow, we've got a lot. That's because we do a lot of thinking, or some of us. I imagine you probably know people that don't have very much cerebrum. Okay, that's funny. Okay, now this is corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is tracts. Remember, tracts are myelinated axons. Yes? And this is the largest tract in the whole body. Okay? Obviously, the whole brain. And this is so the right side of your brain can communicate with the left side of your brain. Only we don't call it side, we call it hemispheres. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere. And it's connected by this huge tract. Okay? This part, and I'm going to kind of outline it. There you go. There you go. There you go. This part right here, diencephalon, which consists of the thalamuses. Okay? The thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. For those of you that have a hard time sleeping, and you may have heard of a chemical called melatonin, it's normally produced right there in the pineal gland, which is part of the diencephalon, specifically the epithalamus. This thing here, round ball down here, is the pituitary gland. Okay, that's a kind of like a storage place for hormones, and it's attached to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is this area right here. And this is the optic chiasma, which is a nuclei that take your right eye and left eye and connect them. So the right sees what the left is seeing, and the left sees what the right is seeing. Okay? Now, in a nutshell, good? And then the thalamus sits right here. But when they cut it, you can't see it. And it kind of looks like an elongated egg. And there's a right side and a left side. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment here. Okay, there's the way it would look if it was dissected. Not as crystal clear, is it? But it's there. Okay, gray versus white matter. Every book that I've ever, and I used to proofread textbooks for accuracy. And every book I've ever read always lists gray matter first. And gray matter is unmyelinated axons, it's cell bodies, it's dendrites. They go on and on and on and on, talk about gray matter. White matter is myelinated axons. So if you're learning it for the first time, you got to learn all that stuff. Here's how to do it. White matter is myelinated axons. Myelinated axons. Yes, remember oligodendrocytes, neurolemocytes, myelin. Gray matter, everything else. Good? But we'll follow the book's pattern. And the book says, you know what, I'm going to try and move this thing. This thing's really a pain in my butt. I'm going to move it over here, see if I can move it over here. Well, that didn't work. All right. I'm going to just hang with me. Hang with me. I thought it might go to a margin, but it's not. Okay. Anyway, we're talking about gray matter, white matter. We're talking about white matter is myelinated axons. Gray matter is everything else. We good? Okay. Whoops, 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 whoops. All right, here we go. Gray matter. See all that? Look at telodendria, dendrites, cell bodies, all that stuff. Yeah? Watch this. Watch this. Form cerebral nuclei. White matter, watch. Myelinated axons. Okay? Okay. Any way that works for you. I say the easiest way for me, remember myelinated axons are white matter. Everything else, gray. Good? Good? Now, the only thing that should be a question to you is why is gray matter so important? Well, gray matter, mainly the big thing is it's where your cell bodies are. So that means what neurons do is generate information, store information, and that happens in the cell body. Okay? The axons and dendrite are just to carry that information from one place to another. So gray matter, white matter. Got it? All right. This picture is pretty cool if you think about it. Okay, this is your convolutions. Let me get the little arrow going here. Here's your convolutions, okay? And you see that's all gray matter, and it's all on the outside, okay? So these are all the cell bodies where all your information is stored. And this white matter is connecting this side, this down to here, the front to the back, and so on and so forth, so we can communicate. It'd be like holding hands with people in a big long chain, and the person at the front of the chain has information the person at the back of the chain needs, and they transfer it through their arms, through other cell bodies, through other nuclei. You get it? If you don't, well, I tried. Okay, now you notice down here there is some gray matter. So when we get around the brain stem, we'll call them basal nuclei, there is going to be some cell bodies. But the conscious part of your brain, outside, gray matter on the outside, white matter on the inside. We good? We good? And this is to show that the basal nuclei, there is some gray matter down there. And this is the spinal cord. See this place down here? It looks like a butterfly inside this white disc. In the spinal cord, it switches. And I'm going to ask you that on an exam. What they do is they take, and the white matter is on the outside, and the gray matter is on the inside. Yeah. Whoop-de-doo. Anyway, good test question. Okay, here's the central nervous system. Yeah, spinal cord brain. Looks kind of like a tree. No, it doesn't. Okay. Okay. All right. Let me see. Oh, remember I told you that in the last video, I told you that there's terminology that goes on with the nervous system. We were talking about neurium versus mycium, and myo and sarco when we talked about muscle, and now we're talking about neuro. And we said that, remember I held up this little cord and I said, what's in it? You said little copper wires. And I said, the copper wires are axons or neurons. And you said, yes. And I said, these copper wires all together in the central nervous system are called a tract. And these copper wires in the peripheral nervous system are called nerves. Okay. And I said, clusters of cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system is called a ganglion. And I showed you a picture of the dorsal root ganglion of the spinal cord. Remember, it was wrapped with a glial cell. Remember that? Satellite cells. And then we talked about a tract. What didn't see is this term right here, funiculi. We're going to see that. That is a large cluster of myelinated axons in the spinal cord. It's called a funiculus. Anyway, you need to know those terms. Okay. That being said, let's go. Support and protection. What did we say that was? Come on. I just talked about it. What did we say support and protection were? Okay, didn't we say it was a sac, and the sac was called meninges, and instead of having two, there's three? Okay, and I know you've heard of this someplace along in your life. You've heard of those meninges. The inside one was called the pia, or pia mater, M-A-T-E-R, and the middle one was called the arachnoid matter, and the last one was called dura, or dura matter. Okay, and that's the one that sits up against the bone. It also talks about the cranium. Okay, when we did the bones of the skull, we talked about the cranium. Meninges. Okay, there's the two things. There's the bone. There's the bone. There's the meninges. And remember CSF? Remember the cord plexus, the blood-brain barrier, astrocytes and epidermal cells, and they formed a filtering system. And that filtering system was called the cord plexus was part of it. Filtering system was the blood-brain barrier. And the fluid, the ultra clean fluid, is called CSF. Okay, so that's protection, because remember I said buoyancy and that kind of stuff. There's the blood-brain barrier. Good. Let's move on. Meninges. Okay, that just says cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, I didn't do this one right. What I should have done is, like I always do, is I make them different colors and I indent them. But there's the pia mater, arachnoid mater, dura mater. And you see another term down here that sets out by itself. It says arachnoid villi. Okay, remember that once CSF is produced, it's contained in storage sacs, and we call those storage sacs ventricles. How many were there? How many were there? Right now you're telling yourself, he never told us. Yes, he did. I said there was 4 of them, remember? There was 4. There was 4. And the first 2 are called lateral. Do you remember that? The first 2 are called lateral. They should be numbers 1 and 2 because the other ones are 3 and 4. Okay? But they call the first 2 lateral. And remember the diencephalon I just showed you? They're around the outside of the diencephalon. That's where those lateral ventricles are. And inside the lateral ventricle is that elongated egg thing I said was called the thalamus. Anyway, getting back to the point, once CSF circulates inside the subarachnoid space, which I haven't told you yet, once it circulates inside of there, it picks up waste material, waste products, and it has to be reabsorbed back into the blood. And what reabsorbs it is a structure sticking down called the arachnoid villi. Remember villi of the digestive tract? What did it do? Come on, what did it do? You're waiting for the answer. What did it do? You looked at it under the microscope. Okay, remember villi? And on the outside of the villi were microvilli. Increased surface area, didn't it? And you looked at those simple columnar epithelium, and you knew that was for absorption. Well, the arachnoid villi extend down into that subarachnoid space and reabsorbed, use CSF, pump it back to the heart so it can be oxygenated and taken to the kidney so it can be cleaned. Here we go. Now, this picture, all of the thing I want you to see. Here's the arachnoid villi. See how they're sticking inside of here? And this blue represents the cerebral spinal fluid. And this hollowed out place is a storage place. And those storage places, not the ventricles, but the storage places in the body where it's kind of like a reservoir are called sinuses. And we have them in our nose, and there was 4 of them. Remember we did the respiratory center? There was 4 of them. Yeah, frontal, sphenoidal, ethmoidal, and maxillary. Do you remember those? And those are like caverns or labyrinths or mazes, so the air can tumble in, be purified, and warmed. Okay, this is a sinus that allows places for the arachnoid villi to reabsorb it. Okay, and we have sinuses over the head. Yes, do they have names? Yes, they do. The names are that match the location. I'm just going to tell you they're called sinuses. I have a slide that has those named for you. If you want to know them, that's great. You can, but I'm not going to test you on them. Okay. Here we go. Durovenous sinuses. Okay. Superior sagittal sinus. So you know what the sagittal is. So the upper sinus that in fact, that was the one you just saw, is the superior sagittal sinus. Guess what else we have? We have an inferior sagittal sinus. You get it? This would be an excellent test question, but I'm not going to ask you. I just want you to know what a sinus is for. And that in the brain, there are sinuses. And the arachnoid villi extend out in those sinuses for reabsorption. Transverse, okay? You got them going front to back. You got them going from side to side. Okay, and the occipital sinus, way at the back part of the brain. You getting it? Okay, so you know there's different types of sinuses. You know what they're for. That's what I want you to walk away from this slide understanding. Okay, ventricles, what were those? Okay, didn't we say that the ventricles were storage places for CSF? Yes, they were, and that's what they are. Okay, how many do we have? Okay, you got 4 right that time because that's not very difficult. What were the first 2 called? They weren't numbers 1 and 2. Okay, remember, what were they called? Lateral, good. What were they lateral in or lateral to? Remember the thalamus, the egg-shaped, elongated egg-shaped thing in the diencephalon? They're lateral to that. What were the other 2 called? Third and fourth, yes. And we're going to see another term come up in a minute called a cerebral aqueduct. Okay, There's the ventricles. There are 4, 2 laterals, and the laterals are separated by a piece of tissue called the septum pellucidum. Septum pellucidum. That separates the lateral ventricles. Good. 3rd ventricle. It's connected to the 4th ventricle by a tube called the cerebral aqueduct. There it is right there. So what happens is these cerebral spinal fluids being made mostly in the upper part of the brain. If you, at birth, that tube is not open, then you have to put a stent in there. A stent is like a hollow tube so it can circulate, because it's got to get back up to those sinuses so it can be reabsorbed. If not, every time the heart beats, you're going to be producing a little more CSF, but it can't be reabsorbed, so you're going to build up all that water. And water on the brain is called hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus, water on the brain. Okay, now in the old days, they had no way of knowing that. So once you were born, they had no way of checking except for the brain would start to swell. And then you know that we're born with a skull that is a cartilage, and then it begins to ossify. When it ossifies, whatever shapes it's in is what you're going to get. So you'd see these people with bulging foreheads, and that's because they had hydrocephalus before they could put that shunt in there. And sometimes, if they didn't catch it quick enough, the water would start to destroy neurons. Can neurons be redone? Nope. So then you lost brain cells, okay? It's immediately checked when you're born, but you can get in a car accident also, or I shouldn't say car accident. You can have an injury to the skull or injury to the brain where that tube, this is an adult or after birth, that tube begins to swell shut. CSF is going to always be made with each heartbeat, but it can't be reabsorbed. And then you start getting pressure on the brain. Since the skull can't expand, you start destroying neurons. Okay? Ventricles of the brain. There we go. Okay, the one that looks like Dodge Ram. Now, to me, this looks like the Dodge Ram thing they put on the front of the trucks and stuff. Okay, if it doesn't look like that to you, hey, I'm sorry, I tried. Okay, but here's your number 1 and 2 lateral ventricles. Right here is where the thalamus is at. Okay, here's your 3rd ventricle. Here's your 4th ventricle. And this little thing that connects them is called the cerebral aqueduct. So you can see, since the foramen magnum is right here, how a jolt to the brain could cause this tissue here to swell and close that off. Yeah? Okay, there you go. There you go. Function of cerebral spinal fluid, what is it? Okay, what is it? Told you what it was. What does it do? Supplies nutrition, gives buoyancy, protection to the central nervous system, yeah, and takes away waste. Cerebral spinal fluid. Good. Functions include buoyancy. Okay, if you didn't have an aquatic environment, then when you moved left, right, forward, backwards, up and down, your spinal cord would be slamming inside your vertebra and your skull would be banging against your head. Yeah, I knew this kid one time was doing headbanger music, shaking his head like this, and he shook his head so hard that his parietal lobe struck the front of his frontal lobe struck the front of his skull, and he passed out. Okay, after I got over being worried that he could hurt himself, then it was funny. Okay, but that's what happens. Is the brain got past the fluid and smacked against that, caused him to knock out. Protection, liquid cushion, environmental stability. This is the way your book wrote it. I think that's kind of a stupid statement, but what it's saying is it gives you nutrition and takes away waste, leaves it stable inside. Okay, that's what it means. See, transports nutrients and removes waste from the brain. Environmental stability. Okay, cord plexus. Remember that filter, the blood-brain barrier? We had those things, we equated them to fibrin in a blood clot, and then we lined it with astrocytes and epidermal cells so it could be filtered. Do you remember that? Cord plexus was part of that blood-brain barrier. Okay, this picture's kind of dumb. It doesn't really show anything, so I'm just going to skip by it. Okay, this shows that filtering system. Okay, with sinuses, the blue represents cerebral spinal fluid. This represents arachnoid villi, and you can see how it goes all the way around the brain, and then down around the spinal cord. Okay, you don't need that. Cerebrum. Okay, now let's look at the lobes. Conscious part of the brain, largest part of the human brain, cerebrum. Okay, we see it with convolutions. We know a convolution is a gyrus and a sulcus, and deep sulci are called fissures. Yeah. Cerebrum, there's going to be 5 lobes to it. 5. You learned 4. Yes, you learned frontal. You learned frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal, didn't you? And there's the one that's hidden underneath that called insula. Insula. There's this, say, sulci, sulcus, gyri, gyrus. Deep grooves are called fissures. Okay, we see that marking the lobes. Cerebral hemispheres. Remember I said there's a right and left lobe? We call it a hemisphere. And it's held together, corpus callosum. Okay, I'm gonna show you that. Cerebral hemispheres. And yes, it is true. Pretty much in all cases, the left side controls the right side of the body, and the right controls the left side of the body. Somebody has an injury to the right side of their brain will usually have paralysis, partial paralysis to the left side, and vice versa. Just the way it works. Longitudinal fissure. See, look at that, mid-sagittal plane. You know what these terms mean. Longitudinal fissure is what we call that fissure that goes from the front to the back. And it is a plane. That fissure is a plane. It's a mid-sagittal plane. We good? Tracts. All right. Remember, tracts are large amounts of axons cabled together in the central nervous system. Large amounts of tracts cabled together in the peripheral nervous system are called nerves. Okay? The largest tract is called corpus callosum. And that's what connects the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Good? 5 distinct lobes. Each hemisphere is divided into 5 distinct lobes. You thought there was 4. Okay, so what are they? Just told you what they were. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe. Let's hold it right there. Pretty much frontal lobe, motor. Sometimes people call it premotor. Okay, it's going to get more complex than that, obviously, but we're just putting a generalized term on it. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe is sensory. We're moving our way to the back of the brain. Parietal lobe, sensory. Now there's other things that are sensory, okay? A vision is sensory, touch is sensory, smell is sensory, okay? And those have different parts of the brain, but generally speaking, parietal lobe, sensory. Temporal lobe, pretty easy, hearing. There's other things. Occipital lobe, that's because our eyes keep us alive, and there's so much to do as far as finding food, escaping predators. This is a big thing in biology. Finding food, finding mates, finding nesting sites, escaping predators. That's huge. We do it with our eyes. Birds do it with their eyes. Other organisms do it by smell. You've seen dogs and cats. They can smell something long ways away, and you have no idea what it is, huh? My dog is always burying stuff out in the riding arena because it's real soft out there. And then when I go to rototill it to clean it all up, she's out there going crazy, digging up stuff she's buried. And she can run around that arena, which is huge, and sniff it and find it. Okay? I can't smell anything but horse poop. Okay? Anyway, different organisms do it different ways. That's what that whole thing was about. And then the last one is called the insula. Okay? And I'll talk about the insula. I'm going to talk about each one of these lobes, okay, and what their generalized function is. Okay, here we go. Now, this on the right-hand side, on your right-hand side, is a real preserved brain that's been dissected because there's fat all over it. And here is the longitudinal fissure. And that thing you see down in the middle of it is the corpus callosum. The rises are called gyrus. The falls are called sulcus. Okay, here's your frontal lobe. Where are we at? Here's your frontal lobe. Here's your parietal lobe. There's your occipital lobe. You can only see 3 of them. What they did in the illustration is they colored them for you: gold, copper, and kind of a bluish gray. This is motor, sensory, vision. Okay. Cerebral lobes. Okay, now we're looking at on the side. Now, don't look at all the color. I don't want you looking at the color. I want you to look at the boxes. Frontal lobe. From, see that dotted dash line? From here all the way here, rostral, is the frontal lobe. From here to here is the parietal lobe. Okay, from here, where do we go? From here all the way back here is the occipital lobe. Now, what they did in each box, they put the kind of generalized generalized description of what they do. Look at this: motor. Look at this. Somatosensory means sensory. I'll talk about that later. Okay. Occipital. Okay, vision. Do you see vision? Temporal lobe. Look at that. Auditory. Okay, auditory. And olfactory. Auditory. Now we know that because your ear's right here. Auditory, olfactory. So this hearing and the sense of smell go on right here. Okay, and you see insula. See how these are called brain hooks. See how they're pulled away and you can see more convolutions back here? This is gustatory, taste, your taste. Oh man, do we have that taste nailed, don't we? Don't we? You know, have you ever thought about it? There's really 4 types of food. Meat, not food, meat. Okay, there's chicken or a bird. Okay, there's beef or a cow. There's a pig and a lamb. Those are pretty much your meat sources, right? And we're saying, well, I like this kind of food. It's still those 4 things. Okay, we got a fish. I forgot about fish. So there's 5. And what the difference is from culture to culture is the spices they put on it. Okay, now I'm hooked on Indian food. Why? Because the spices are off the friggin' chart. Yeah. If you go to the Midwest, food is very bland. It's meat and potatoes and gravy, baby. And the gravy's there because it has fat in it, which contains taste. If you get rid of the fat, the gravy, you're eating blah food, man. Okay. So what we have done is because we enjoy eating, we enjoy the flavors. And that's where the culture stuff comes in. Anyway, that being said, insula, baby, insula, gustatory, sense of taste. Boy, some people, that sucker's huge, isn't it? Okay, now you see another thing here. It's called Wernicke's area. This is only on the left side. There's another place right here called Broca's area, B-R-O-C-A. Wernicke's area is understanding written and spoken language. I'm talking to you right now, and let's just say it does mean something, okay? The words that I am relaying to you have meaning. That's because of this guy right here. And that is a bunch of cell bodies working together that they specialize in one thing: understanding written and spoken language right there. Yeah, yeah. Let me get it for you. Wherever we go. Written and spoken language. There's another area right here containing the cell bodies that is motor, writing and speaking language. So you understand it here, you shift it up here and you do it. It's only on the left side. I always tell a story about a buddy of mine that was a teacher in anatomy and physiology. He had his doctorate, and he had AFib, which is atrial fibrillation. We talked about that. And he had himself a girlfriend, and when you have AFib, you don't have any energy, okay? So fill in the blank. So he was going in to have a procedure done in order to eliminate or to reduce amount of AFib. And he clotted, okay? He clotted. And what happened is the clot starved this area right here and way over here. So just caught part of Wernicke's area, but it just pretty much nailed Broca's area, okay? And the tissues around it, okay? Now, I'm doing this for a reason. I went in to see him right after it happened. What was he not able to do? This is the left side of the brain. Okay, you said, well, he had paralysis in the right side. You're absolutely correct. What else? He couldn't speak. He could, because it nailed most of his Broca's area, which is, just a minute, is this area right in here. And he could understand, but he had a lot of trouble understanding what I was saying, but he could understand, okay? He could watch TV and he could read the newspaper, okay? It was difficult. Now, what happened is they thought it had stopped, but the toxins end up starting to work more and more of Wernicke's area to where he couldn't understand you, okay? Couldn't understand me. So when I went back to see him about 2 weeks after that, he didn't know who I was. And I went to see him about a month after that, and he didn't know the sun was shining. Okay, now I know that sounds a little cruel, but I want you to remember, Wernicke's area and Broca's area only on the left side, and he also had paralysis on the right. We doing good? Okay. I don't know. Your next question is, how is he now? Hell, I don't know. Okay. You don't know. Okay, frontal lobe. Now we're going to do the lobes. Okay, what did we say? Frontal lobe is what? Motor, primary motor, premotor sometimes. It ends at the central sulcus. It ends at the central sulcus. Now I'm going to take you back a couple of slides. You're going to get a little dizzy because I'm going to go quick. You see this little dotted line? This is called the central sulcus. Do you see that? That divides the frontal from the parietal lobes. Do you see that? Okay, here we go. Central sulcus, do you see it? Central sulcus. And the temporal lobe, remember, which was olfactory hearing? The temporal lobe, I'm going to go back. This is the lateral sulcus. So this area, the parietal lobe, is separated by the central sulcus and the lateral sulcus. And then the parietal lobe is between the central sulcus, the parietal occipital sulcus, it's named because of the two lobes, and the lateral. Good? There you go. Now, the next term you see is precentral gyrus. Let me show you what they're talking about. Do you see this raised portion right here? That's called a gyrus. Here's another gyrus. This is precentral gyrus. This is post-central gyrus. This gyri are really important. I'm going to show you a slide in a few moments that's going to talk about those specific things and what's going on in there as far as sensory and motor. Good? Okay, frontal lobe, precentral gyrus. Precentral gyrus is in the in the frontal lobe. Precentral gyrus, frontal lobe. Postcentral gyrus, parietal lobe. Okay? So pre is motor, post sensory. Okay? Frontal lobe, what goes on there? Look at we already talked about this. Verbal communication, decision making. Some of us are lousy in that part. Planning. Okay? When you sit out and plan things, how you're going to approach something comes out of the frontal lobe, and your personality. I know a lot of people have a jacked up frontal lobe, huh? Okay? Personality. That all comes out of the frontal lobe. Parietal lobe. Okay, remember the parietal lobe? It's still the central sulcus, only now it's posterior. And it goes all the way back to the occipital lobe, which was the parietal occipital sulcus. Yeah, there it is. Parietal occipital sulcus. Yeah. Postcentral gyrus should say something about sensory down here. Doesn't, does it? But anyway, it should say something about sensory. Oop, oop. There it is. Sensory. Good? Good? Okay. Temporal lobe, right where your ears are at. So immediately you say, hearing, yes, but remember, sense of smell there. Sense of smell. So hearing, sense of smell. Hearing, sense of smell. Good? Test questions. Test questions. Next one, occipital lobe, vision. Now it isn't just vision. You don't see with your lobe. What you do is you have receptors in your eye that are called photoreceptors. So when you have light, they're split. You have two types. You have rods and cones. Rods are for light, cones are for color. And that determines what you're looking at. And you send it back to your occipital lobe. That information you send back to the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe says, hey, that's an airplane. Or hey, that's a dog or a cat. Okay? Or hey, that's a sandwich. Do you see? Got it? Got it? So the occipital lobe is just where all the information, because remember, it is cell bodies, where all the information is analyzed. Okay, it says processes and stores incoming visual information and memories. When you're born, you got nothing back there. Okay, you don't have any vision. So the whole time that you're awake in this world, you're taking things and storing it back there. If I told you right now an apple, you'd have a vision of a red apple, hopefully. Some of you might have green apple. Some of you might have one with a worm in it. I don't know. But the point is, I said an apple. You never knew what an apple was till you saw it the first time and somebody said it was apple. If somebody told you that that was a peach and that's all you ever heard, you'd look at an apple and call it a peach. Okay? Because those are information that we have brought in through our eyes and we're storing it back there for a later date. Got it? So that's what it means by stores incoming information and memories. Good? Good? That's the occipital lobe. If I ask you to close your eyes right now and imagine a bald eagle, you'd have it. You see how you got it? What you did is you have seen a bald eagle before, so you went back to the occipital lobe and you brought it forward, okay, to the parietal lobe. Okay, insula. Remember this one? This is the one where the brain hooks were pulled back, and I said this one causes us to be fat, okay? And this is when I gave you the examples of food, okay, of meat, okay? We still have the same basic meat. We just add spices to it, yeah? And some cultures have better spices than others, okay? Okay. If you want to see something really bland, got to go to England. They have, their food has no taste, man. I don't know what's wrong with them people. Okay, fish and chips aren't like the fish and chips we have here. Fish and chips here, we put spices in a batter. Back there, I don't know what the heck they do, but it is jacked up, at least from my standpoint, okay? Involved in memory and interpretation of taste, okay? If I said, you taste a jalapeno, you know what that taste comes from. Well, that memory is stored in the insula. Got it? You taste hot apple pie. Okay, that memory is stored in the insula. We good? Okay. Now you can vision and see a hot apple pie. Okay? All right. And this is those 5 lobes, tells you what they do. Look at part of Wernicke's. We talked about that. And then the primary function. This would be a good one for you to color in, you know, with the little clouds and stuff that I do. Okay, functional areas of the cerebrum. Remember our functions: motor, sensory, and association, interneurons. Remember that? So we're going to take things in motor, or we're going to go take them out motor. We're going to take them in sensory, and we're going to interpret them in between. So we have motor, sensory, and association. What was the other name for motor? What was it? I think it started with an E. Come on, you're not doing a very good job. E, efferent. What about sensory? Okay, you got that one. You said afferent. Yeah, good. That wasn't tough. And what about association? So you're not thinking as we go through these, okay? You can keep hitting pause. That's what I would suggest you doing. It makes this, number one, not as boring. Number two, it makes your brain think, okay? It was called association and interneurons. Okay. Motor. Okay. Primary motor. Somatic motor. Remember what somatic meant? Went to skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles you have conscious control over. Since you have conscious control over it, that's going to be your moving your skeletal muscles. Yeah? voluntary skeletal muscle activity, primary motor. Within the precentral gyrus. What do you mean within the precentral gyrus? Remember I told you that? Remember that little slice right there, that gyrus? We're going to talk about that thing because it's really important. Remember, it was in front of the central sulcus, in the frontal lobe. The one that was caudal to it is sensory, and it was called postcentral gyrus. Okay, picture it as a slice of bread. Okay, we're going to come back to this. I kind of made these out of order. I shouldn't have. One of these days I'll fix it. Okay. Anyway, we're going to go to Broca's area. Remember, Broca wasn't there, and I said, imagine they had the brain hooks. They pulled it away, and I said, right here is the area responsible for motor speech and written language. Motor speech, written language. Broca's area. See, necessary for vocalization. Yeah, necessary for vocalization. Remember your mom yelling at you? Her Broca's area was working 24/7, huh? Okay, now I'm gonna show you a picture. Now, I don't want you to look at this. I said, don't look at this. Don't look at this. I want you to look at this. Okay, that's that slice of bread I was telling you about. Right here is the central sulcus. This is the longitudinal fissure. This piece of bread right here is called the pre-central gyrus. This gyrus has a name. It's called pre-central gyrus. If we took that out and looked at it from the side, like this is the crust of the bread, this is the white of the bread, this is the crust of the bread. Now, what this is showing you is deep down here, this here is right here in that sagittal plane. Okay, that's where this is. And this out here is this out over here. And what it is, it's how do we control the skeletal muscles going to these places? Look at your toes, way down inside of here. Right here at the corner, right at the apex. That's your hip and your trunk. Look at how much of the cell bodies are for your thumb. Your thumb. Why? Because your thumb is huge in evolutionary history. It allows you to grip things and to grip tree branches because you were arboreal. We were arboreal. That's how we escape our predators. Without this, all you're trying to do it with your fingers is not too good. And we can also grip weapons and make tools using that thumb. That's why that thumb is so big, and a big portion of your gyrus, your cell bodies deal with that. Look at the little finger, almost worthless. Look at your toes. Okay, the only things that are good for is to go in a shoe. Your tongue, so on and so forth. Do you see? So if I took a probe, I took a piece of metal, it's like a needle, and I stuck it right there and put a little electricity to it, the shoulder would start moving. Okay, because it's motor. I put a little electricity. All I'm doing is doing what the brain would do by taking sodium. Okay, if I did it right here, it'd be the neck. Your neck would start moving. Because remember, these are all motor. You get it? Okay. Sensory. Now we're moving further back in the brain. Primary visual. Okay. I like it better. They're talking about what is sensory. Is vision sensory? Hello? Of course it is. So is taste. So is, well, not taste. Sensory, smell, touch, pressure, all that stuff comes in through the spinal cord. Okay, remember, it's got to get into the brain first. Comes in through the spinal cord, goes past the medulla, goes past the pons, may switch over, may not switch over, goes up to the thalamus. Remember that elongated egg thing? And from there, it goes to the postcentral gyrus. Postcentral gyrus. Auditory, sensory is in the in the temporal lobe. Gustatory. Gustatory is taste. That's sensory. Okay? Okay? So eyes, hearing, taste, sensory. Okay? Olfactory, sensory. So we collect those from receptors. We run them to the brain. What part of the brain do we run them to? Well, you're going to see that second slice of bread. And then from there, it's distributed to the right part. You got to have somebody analyze that stuff to tell you what part of the brain to go to in order to be stored and make a decision. You get it? Once the decision made, it's no longer sensory, it's motor. Okay, remember, now look at it. Don't look over here. Don't look over here. I know you're looking at them lips. Don't look there. Don't look at the lips. You keep looking at the lips. Okay, now you're looking at the genitals. Don't look at the genitals. Look at this slice right here. See that slice? There's your central sulcus. This is post-central gyrus, just like the other one, only a little bit more, because this is sensory. We have a big, look at the big old lips and teeth and stuff in the mouth. Look how big that is. Why? Because we use our mouth for vocalization, for eating, okay? And we have to have a lot of cell bodies for that, okay? Still the thumb. Look at how big the thumb is. And things are organized a little bit differently here, but not too much, okay? And you notice how if I stuck a probe right here, right there, that little metal needle, and I put electricity to it, okay, your thumb would, you'd feel your thumb. I'm just being poked by in my thumb. No, you're not. There ain't nothing there. Why? Because you you bypass that nerve, and you're just doing it synthetically. Okay, okay, okay. Got it. Move on. Association. Now we did motor, then we did a sensory. Now we're doing association areas. Frontal lobe has association areas in it. That's in the precentral gyrus. Somatosensory, so you know we're getting motor and we're getting sensory because you're associating. You're doing both. Okay. Auditory. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute. Auditory was hearing, that was sensory. Yes, but then you store it in the temporal lobe and you remember that. That means you associated it. Got it? Visual, same thing, same thing. So when we talk about association, we're talking about the whole darn brain, aren't we? Okay, there's Wernicke's. Remember, look at it. Recognizes and comprehends written and spoken language located in the left hemisphere and overlaps in the parietal and temporal lobes. I showed you a picture of that. Told you about my buddy. Yeah? Gnostic. Okay. Now, maybe you don't know what the word Gnostic means. Let me explain it to you because it's kind of a weird thing, especially since we just had Easter. Gnostic is your spirit. You know, you think somebody's looking over your shoulder, or maybe God is up there and he's looking at you, or his kid Jesus is down there looking at you. Your spiritual belief, things that you can't see that you, like Area 51, where UFOs are at. People say there's UFOs, are there? Have you ever seen one? No. Have you ever seen God? Any God, I don't care what culture you're in. Have you ever seen that divine thing out there? No, you haven't. But do you believe it's there? And the answer is, I don't know. That's up to you. But that's your Gnostic abilities, okay? Things you can't see. And that involves your occipital lobe, your temporal lobe, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see? That's what Gnostic means. And that's association, obviously. Hey, have you ever done that where you got yourself in trouble, especially when you're younger with your parents and you're saying, you get in your room because you know you're going to catch hell, and you say, man, if there's a God out there, Jesus, let me get out of this and I'll go to church. Okay? And then you get out of it and you go, Sunday comes and you're going, hey, I'll catch it next Sunday. Okay? I'm tired. Okay? I never did. I always did. I was always in trouble. And I don't know if there was a Gnostic guy out there or not, but he got my bacon out of the fire a bunch of times. Okay, moving on. Okay, higher order processing. Okay, we're obviously in the cerebrum. We are one of the primates. The primates are chimpanzees, monkeys, orangutans, and us, gorillas and us. We are the primates. And we have the largest cerebrum of all living organisms. And that means We have higher order processing. We can think things out. If you ever take an IQ test, if you've ever had an IQ test, they don't ask any questions, Jacko. It's all lines and boxes, and you have to determine which line is larger, which ones are the same, and they're moving in different directions, okay? Because if it was questions, you could get smarter, couldn't you? So you could increase your what did I just say? Your IQ. You can't increase your IQ. You're born with that sucker, okay? So when you take an IQ test, it's based on spatial relationships. That's where I was going with that. Spatial relationships. How long is certain things? How many shaded areas do you see? So on and so forth, okay? One of these days, I'll tell you, I took one. Yeah. Housed in both cerebral hemispheres. Of course, you know it's right side, left side. We're good with that. Okay, central white matter. Remember me saying that in the cerebrum, the cell bodies were located on the outside, and diving down deep were the dendrites and axons. Okay, so white matter was on the inside, gray matter was on the outside. You wanted as much gray matter as you could, so we had the convolutions. Do you remember that? Okay, here we're back to that. The central white matter is in deep in the brain, switched on the spinal cord. We're not talking about the spinal cord right now. Composed of myelinated axons, bundled into tracks. You reading this? Okay, you can pause this. I'm not going to sit here and read it to you. That's a waste of my time and definitely a waste of yours. Okay, and it says most axons are bundled into tracks, which can be classified into one of three categories: association tracks. Okay, those are tracks that are going to bring different parts of your brains together, different parts or different nuclei together. Those are called association. We just went through a whole list of those. Commissural tracts and projection tracts. Commissural tracts come in, projection tracts go out, association are in between. Kind of see in the routine here. Okay, I really like this picture, even though it doesn't show that much. Do you see these pink or purple lines? Those represent arms. Those represent tracks. Those represent axons, okay, and dendrites. Here you see the white matter? See the gray matter? You see how this white matter comes down? Okay, now let's make it motor right now. If this was a motor track, you see how it comes down and it switches in the medulla? There's a term for that. It's called decussation. There's how it's spelled right there. Decussation. You know it as chiasma or crossing over. And it may or may not cross over in the medulla. But if it does, this area right here is called the pyramids of the medulla. So you can see the right. Let's see, this would be, this is the back side. So this is the right side, comes out, switches over and goes down the left side and vice versa. And then remember this guy right here, corpus callosum, connects it. So these represent tracks. Got it? And you notice it's white matter. And it's connecting. What it doesn't show is it goes up here and connects all these gray matter, which are the cell bodies. Yeah. And this would show it being connected. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I want you to remember that one. Cerebral nuclei, cell bodies. You knew that. Remember we talked about that? Gray matter. Okay, found on the outside in the brain, inside in the spinal cord. Okay, now each cluster of cell bodies is called a nucleus. Unless it's really big, then it's called a center. Okay? We have all of them named, and there's hundreds of them in the brain named. At this level, all I want you to know, I'm going to give you 5. In the course of this video, I'm going to give you 5 I want you to know, because they're the main ones, like amygdaloid, okay, caudate nucleus, okay, and I'm just throw out a couple for them. So caudate nucleus, amygdaloid, that's the one where you get pissed off, okay, leniform, claustrum. This is different claustrum than in the mammary glands, claustrum, Okay, there's 4 of them. I'm going to come back and do this more because this is how we do the limbic system. Remember the Hollywood system? We connect these nuclei and they get a response. So if you're pissed off, you're going to stimulate the amygdaloid. If you're hungry, you're going to stimulate another nuclei. You see where I'm going with this? Okay. And this kind of shows you a similar picture with the arms connecting. But you see this and this and this and this and this. These are all cell bodies that have a name. Okay. Here's the caudate nucleus. You see it right here? Here's the amygdaloid. So if you take the caudate nucleus, the amygdaloid, and let me pick another one. The leniform, which are these guys right here. The leniform. You may get somebody who's really hungry and pissed off. Got it? So anyway, you're going to see that's going to lead to the limbic system. But right now, I'm just telling you, nuclei are throughout the brain and the central nervous system, and they store thoughts. They store images. They store all those kind of things, and each one specializes. Okay? Hunger. Okay? We have nuclei that specialize in hunger. And when you're not hungry anymore, it shuts off its information. So you don't feel anymore. Same thing with thirst. Same thing with anger. Same thing with that. When you're not hungry and you're not thirsty, it's called satiety. But anyway, any of those things you have nuclei that are responsible for those particular things. Diencephalon. Okay, we're done with the cerebrum. Now we're going to go to the inside brain. Remember, you peel off the cerebrum, all those convolutions, and now we're looking at the inside part of it. Okay, the inside part of it, diencephalon. Pretty much hormones and a switching station. Okay, like a relay station. 2 things. Okay, here we go. The thalamuses. Remember me telling you the diencephalon consisted of the thalamuses? There's an epithalamus. What I want you to remember off that, you can write it in right now. The epithalamus, pineal gland, P-I-N-E-A-L, produces melatonin. That puts you to sleepy by. If you decide to take A and P from me, when we do the epithalamus, we do the pineal gland, we talk about their circadian rhythm. That's that 24-hour rhythm that goes around and around. Okay? So when you start feeling tired and you want to go to sleep, you'll start releasing melatonin. And that creates an IPSP. Don't worry about it. But that creates an IPSP, which stands inhibitory postsynaptic potential. And what that does is the stimuli are still there. You're still hearing noises. Okay? You're still hearing sound. But what happens is it deadens and deadens because it takes more intensity for you to consciously think about it or hear it or whatever it may be. That's because we're adding chlorine into the cell. Don't worry about it, but that is what an IPSP is, and melatonin is what starts that. And that's in the epithalamus. Epi above the thalamus, okay? The thalamus, remember that elongated egg? I've talked about it 4 times already today. That's the elongated egg, and there's a right and a left. And you're saying, well, what is an egg? It is clusters of nuclei. Cluster, 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 cluster makes the left egg. Cluster, 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 cluster makes the right egg. Got it? I'll show you what I mean. Hypothalamus, when you see hypothalamus, think hormones. Okay? Think hormones. Okay, your growth hormone, somatostatin, thyroid stimulating hormone. Those are all produced either in the hypothalamus or they're stored in the pituitary gland and controlled by the hypothalamus. Okay? If it controls the release of it, we call it tropic, T-R-O-P-I-C. If it causes an effect on a gland or a cell to do something, to produce something, we call it trophic, P-H-I-C. Anyway, neither here nor there. Okay, here's a picture. Orientation, corpus callosum. There'd be an egg right here. I think that maybe that's what that is supposed to remind you of, half the egg. There's another one on the other side, but it's split down the middle because this is a mid-sagittal plane. See the purple line? See it? That's your thalamus. I mean, that's your diencephalon. Sorry, that's your diencephalon, which consists of the epithalamus, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus. Got it? Here's your pineal gland. Remember the pineal gland? There, it's spelled right there. There's your pineal gland, which is melatonin. Okay, not melanin. That's pigment. It's melatonin. Sleepy bye. Okay, and this is your pituitary gland, posterior, anterior. We call that a hypophysis. Hypophysis. Okay, and this little thing that sticks out here is the optic chiasm. Optic chiasm or chiasma. Remember that? Right eye, left eye coming together, switching over, and then it goes to the sense of vision, which is back here. Okay, occipital lobe. We got all this? Got all this? Okay. So we got, let me do it again. We have epithalamus, thalamus, hypothalamus. So hypothalamus, thalamus, epithalamus. Good, good. Look at, you can still see part of the cord plexus, third ventricle. Anyway, remember the ventricles. Epithalamus. What did I say was associated with it? Come on. I'm getting tired and you're not paying attention. What did I say was associated with the epithalamus? Pineal gland, circadian rhythm, your 24-hour daily rhythm. Okay? Melatonin. Okay, it tells you where it's at. Look at this. Pineal gland, melatonin, circadian rhythm. Circa, C-I-R-C-A, means around. Your rhythm around 24 hours. Got it? Got it? Okay, you can pause this and read it, copy it down. Don't just look at it, because if you just look at this stuff, you're not going to remember it. You have to write it. Puts it in your brain in another modality. Not have another. Okay, you don't need another. Habenular or nuller nuclei is a relay center. Look, we're starting to see the limbic system. Remember that guy? Okay. Involved in viscera. That means kind of how your stomach feels, and emotional responses to odor. You ever notice that sometimes you'll smell something and you think you're going to friggin' barf, right? That's the nuclei are stimulated, and it's a learned response. Okay. Brand new born babies, born babies, they smell something, they don't barf because they have no association with it. Okay, so those nuclei, the habenular nuclei, store visceral and emotional responses to odor. Some of us, we smell barf, and man, we barf. Others smell it? No. I have stories to go with it, but we don't have time to go through it. Some real good ones. Anyway, habenular nuclei. Thalamus. Now we're done with the epithalamus. Now let's go to the thalamus. What did we say it was? Remember those elongated eggs? And it's a relay station. Okay, look, this one is a test question. All sensory information, impulse, all sensory information from all conscious senses, sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of vision, except olfaction, except for the sense of smell, go through the thalamus. Everything except for the sense of smell, olfaction, goes through the thalamus. There's your test question. It's a relay point. Huge. Sensory, somatosensory, coming from your body, sensory cortex, go through the thalamus. Picture. Remember those eggs? There's where they would be if we could move. Remember the brain hook we took and pulled the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe away, and we saw the insula? If we went in a little further, this is where your diencephalon is. And these are those eggs. And these colors on the eggs represent different nuclei. Got it? Different nuclei. Okay, so this nuclei may be responsible for a sense of the beginning of smell. This may be, no, that's olfactory. That's exactly what it's not. Taste, vision, touch, all these sensory things, these nuclei are responsible for it. And then they take and switch them. Go send them to different parts of the brain. And we have one on the right side, one on the left. That's the thalamus, period. Hypothalamus. When you see hypothalamus, what do you think of? What do you think of? Come on, we talked about it. Hormones, the endocrine system, okay? The master gland is the pituitary gland. There's glands all over, there is endocrine glands all over your body, okay? There's only 3 of them in your body that have just endocrine functions: thyroid, pituitary, and adrenal glands. Good? Hypothalamus. Infundibulum. I'm going to tell you what that is. But the hypothalamus extends down to the pituitary gland by a little thin structure called the infundibulum. And inside the infundibulum is the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Portal system. It's a tube, and it hides out in the infundibulum. Got it? I'll show you a picture. Here we go. This is a cool picture, and I'll tell you what you're looking at. Okay, this is the optic chiasma. Okay, switch the eyes. Don't worry about that one. It has nothing to do with this stuff. Here is the hypothalamus. These different colored chunks that you see represent nuclei with a specific function. Okay, and we said some of the specific function is hormones. No, let me back that up. These are producing hormones. Got it? These are producing hormones. Now, these are the tropic, T-R-O-P-I-C hormones. They're going to cause hormones that are produced in the anterior pituitary to be released. And they travel in a portal system that comes right down this. This is the infundibulum, a portal system. And the portal system is called the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. Got it? And what you're looking at is cell bodies. And they produce hormones. And those hormones have control over the anterior pituitary hormones. Got it? Okay, now, remember there's 2 systems that control the body. The nervous system, which is fast-acting, short duration. And there's a hormonal system, slow-acting, long duration. So functions of the hypothalamus, hormone release, and everything to deal with hormones. Growth that may go on for years. Milk production that may go on for months or a year. All those things are control of hormones, which means it's under control pretty much, not all, pretty much the hypothalamus. Okay? Master control autonomic nervous system, master control endocrine system, body temperature. Okay? How the heck do you know to be cold? When you're cold, how do you know to warm up? You don't have to think about it. Well, let me rephrase that. You're cold, you go put on a jacket. But if you're sleeping and you're cold, your muscles will start to contract just a little bit, which produces heat, and then you capture that heat. That's all under control of those little colored things that were in the hypothalamus. Emotional behavior. Okay? Emotional behavior. You get pissed off. You're happy. You're sad. Whatever it may be. Those are all control of the hormone system. Okay? Food intake. God, I wish we could block that sucker, huh? Okay? There's some people that do not have an off switch. Those are called Prader-Willis. Yeah? And they can't stop eating. Water intake and retention. Control of water intake and retention. Thirst. Circadian rhythms. Okay, now we're talking about hormone, remember? The pineal gland and melatonin. Blood vessel constriction and dilation. This is called vasopressin, is the hormone released from the posterior pituitary, also called ADH. Okay, that causes your blood vessels to constrict and relax. Milk letdown. Okay, now understand when you release a hormone, anybody can release those hormones. Anybody can be injected with those hormones, but it has to have a target gland. Could they put prolactin and oxytocin in me? Yes, they could. Would I start producing milk? No, because I don't have the target glands, which are lactiferous glands. Could I have milk letdown? No, I don't have the glands. Got it? But females do. So when females are hit with prolactin, they start making milk. The lactiferous glands start making milk because it's a hormonal controlled, under hormonal control. When they have oxytocin is released from the posterior pituitary, they have milk let down, it goes into the lactiferous ducts, and they start leaking. Okay, here's a table of some of those nuclei and what they do. Okay, look at this. There's satiety, hunger. Look, there's thirst, oxytocin, sensation, sleep, wake, all that kind of stuff. Okay, interesting. Brainstem, brainstem. Hey there, we're back. Look a little more normal. There we go. Now we're going to go to the third part of the brain. We did the cerebrum, the conscious part of the brain. We did the diencephalon, the thalamuses, and now we're doing the brain stem. Okay, brain stem. That's a continuation. Does Mom have a piece of ham? That's a continuation of the spinal cord. Goes up through the foramen magnum. Remember that? Also connects the cerebellum to the spinal cord. You're going to find out there's 3 parts to the cerebellum. And those parts attach to the midbrain, the top one, midbrain, the middle one, pons, the lower one, medulla. You're going to see that. Brainstem. This kind of makes sense. Passageway for all tracks coming from the spinal cord to go up to the cerebrum. Duh. How else is it going to get there? Remember, I also said the cardiac and respiratory rates are determined there. So when your heart speeds up, medulla's doing it. Respiratory rate goes up, medulla, pons. Good? Cranial nerves. Remember me showing you the picture of the brain upside down and the eyeballs? And I said, see those gold things? Those gold things represent cranial nerves, of which there are 12 pair. Brainstem, 3 parts. Brainstem, 3 parts. Upper part, it's curved, midbrain. First swelling, as we go from anterior to posterior, pons. And the last one, just before it goes, exits the foramen magnum, medulla, sometimes called medulla oblongata. Good? Did you guys get that? Another piece of ham. Okay. Brainstem. Brainstem. Okay, what do you see in this picture? Remember those 2 egg things? Those 2 egg things, the thalamus? Well, that's a picture of that. Okay, this is the pons. So this really is the diencephalon. These gold things are cranial nerves. Okay, this is the pons. This is the medulla. What you can't see here is that arch portion. That arch portion is the midbrain. Okay. Now here, look at it on the side. It says diencephalon. Well, it's part of the diencephalon because remember the diencephalon, there's 3 parts. Remember the optic chiasma when I showed you the pituitary gland? Okay. And we'll talk about these peduncles. I saw them someplace. There we go. We'll talk about those peduncles in a minute. Okay, here it's from the side. It's a little bit more accurate. Another piece of ham. Okay, here it's more accurate. Where'd you go? Okay, here's those egg-shaped things. Remember, elongated egg. Thalamus, pineal gland. Okay, these are peduncles. I'll get to those. This is kind of like the pons, but it's been cut away a little bit. And this is the medulla. This shows what you're looking at. Okay, now what they're saying is, if I go to the midbrain portion of the brain, what am I going to see there? Remember the cerebral aqueduct carries CSF between the third and fourth ventricles? And we talked about putting a stent in and hydrocephalus and stuff. That's where it hangs out. That's where it hangs out. Now in lab, we have some pictures of the brain, the overall outside of the brain, and then we've taken it apart so you can see the sagittal view, and you'll see the third and fourth ventricles in there and the cerebral aqueduct. It says somatic and motor go through here. Remember, I said it connects the body to the brain and the brain to the body. Duh. So that means you're going to have both sensory and motor go through there. Okay. Okay. Now remember, it goes through the thalamus too, and it goes through those. If it's motor, it goes through those slices of bread called pre and post central gyrus. But that's not what we're talking about. Okay, we're just talking about what goes through the midbrain, motor and sensory. Okay, cerebellar peduncles. Remember those three parts I was talking about? Okay, the midbrain is connected to the superior cerebellar peduncle. Excuse me, that's like wires that connect the two. So you'll look at it from a sagittal view and you'll see that cauliflower. And there's three kind of, I don't want to use the word lobes because we're going to use it for something else, but it's like three masses. The top mass is called superior, the middle mass is called middle, and the lower mass is called inferior. And we say peduncles with it, and that's what connects it to the brain stem. The brain stem, top part is midbrain, middle is called the pons, lower is called the medulla, and they're connected by peduncles. Okay, now we're going to see, a minute, don't look at this. I'm hungry. I'm hungry. No satiety here. Pons. Okay, it's the middle part. Look at middle cerebellar peduncles. I'm going to ask you a test question. And what I'm going to say is, what the pons is connected to the cerebellum by way of what? And it's the middle cerebellar peduncles. Whenever you say connected, it's peduncles. Okay? Superior, middle, and inferior. Obviously, inferior is going to be the medulla oblongata. Respiratory center. Respiratory center. Pons. No midbrain here. Pons, medulla. Those are cranial nerves. Here's just a little bit of the cerebellum. Remember I said there were three masses, superior, middle, and inferior, connected by peduncles. Pyramids. Now, I talked about pyramids before. You may not have caught it. You didn't see that. The most inferior portion of the brainstem, medulla oblongata, there's pyramids in there. Remember those lines I said I wanted you to remember? That straight on view? And it had green lines that came down, and then they crossed over, and I said the three words for crossing over are crossing over, decussation, and chiasma. Do you remember that? Okay? And I said the place that they do it are called the pyramids, and they're the pyramids of the medulla, or medullary pyramids. Okay, cortical spinal, that means motor tracks going down. There. There's four words for it. Contralateralization, I forgot about that one. When you cross over, called crossing over, called chiasma, called decussation, also called contralateralization, which you see right here. Contralateralization / decussation of the pyramids. Okay, here's to you. And don't drink this stuff either. pH is about like 3.5, man. It's eating you up. Don't eat that. Drink water. Okay, it's good for you. Okay. Now, what was I going to tell you? Decussations, crossing over, right side of the brain, left side of the brain, da 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 da. I don't remember what the hell it was. Okay, let's go to something else. Connected to the medulla is connected to the cerebellum by way of the inferior cerebellar peduncles. You know what that is now. Okay. Okay. Oh, I remember what I was talking about. Decussation occurs 2 places in the central nervous system. One is in the pyramids of the medulla. That's where one decussation takes place. The other one's down in the spinal cord. Okay, you could decussate down there too. Got it? 2 places. I think that's a test question. If not, I'll make it a test question. How's that grab you? Cardiac center. Okay, remember we said respiratory center, pons, cardiac, and respiratory medulla. Vasomotor. Whenever you see vasomotor, with that, or vasal, that has to do with blood vessel diameter. Okay? There you go. Controlled out of the medulla. Respiratory. Okay. Remember, cardiac, respiratory, medulla. Cardiac alone, pons. Okay? Remember we said, and I was kind of searching for it, but here we go. Nuclei, you have nuclei that have a specific job to do, and we were doing for the thalamus. Remember I showed you the different colors on those elongated eggs? And I said, I was trying to come up with what they control or could control. Here's a coughing, sneezing, salivation, swallowing, all those things run through that center. Okay, anyway, the medulla is responsible for that too, because obviously everything's running through there. Duh. Okay, now what they did in this, I liked what they did in this slide. Do you see where you have different colors? This is the big swollen area of the medulla. You see the different colors? Those represent nuclei with a job, okay? And here's the nuclei for cardiac, vasomotor, pyramids, respiratory, gagging, swallowing, all those kind of things. That's what those are responsible for. We good? Okay, last part of the brain. Last part of the brain. Don't watch. Cerebellum. Almost done. Almost hit satiety. Cerebellum. Now, remember, I said I didn't want to use the word lobes. I said I wanted to use cluster, and we had a superior, middle, and inferior. Now you're going to see why, because they got different names. First thing, we know the cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. We know that we have to have extra surface area. We don't have convolutions because they're small. We call them folia. And we're going to find out the 2 lobes are separated by tissue called a vermis. I'm going to have this for you. We also know we have superior, middle, and inferior peduncles that connect it to the midbrain. To the brain stem. Okay, so far so good. We know its generalized function is fine motor control. Handwriting, walking on a fence, okay? What else? Second largest part of the brain. Oh, we just said that. Second largest part of the brain. Boy, isn't that astonishing? Here's to you. Ever tell you not to drink that stuff? pH about 3.5. It's just eating you up. You ever burp, have it come out your nose or make your eyes water? You know why now, huh? Because your nasopharynx has a station tube in there and has a lacrimal canal that drains your tears. Well, you push enough of that bubbles up there and pretty soon it's going to pop out in that lacrimal canal in your eyes, make your eyes burn. Just don't drink that. Don't drink that. Drink something else like water, okay? You ever tried drinking smart water, realize it didn't work? Okay. Cerebellum, 3 portions. Now, you would think 3 portions, upper, middle, lower. Not what it means. It's going to mean superficial, deep, and ultra deep. Superficial, deep, and ultra deep. It's kind of set up a little bit different. That's why I said we can't go into those lobes. I understand it. When I see it, I think of lobes. Not here, not here. And you can see folia, the small convolutions, vermis, what separates the two major lobes. Picture, here we go. See the folia, all those little ripples? And here's the vermis that connects the two. Here's what it would set in the brain. And this would, remember I said there was a mass, an upper mass, a middle mass, and a lower mass. So this is upper connected to the midbrain by way of the superior peduncles, superior cerebellar peduncles. And then here's the middle mass that connects to the pons and the inferior mass that connects to the medulla. Good, good. Okay, and then we have superficial, deep, and ultra deep. Okay. Now, I put the cat part of the brain. If you look online, you're probably not going to see. Where's my, too big a bite. Just hang tight. Okay, the cat part of the brain. It says function of the cerebellum. I remember it this way. You don't have to remember it this way. I'm not going to ask you on the test this way. Cat, picture a cat walking on a fence. It's able to do that. Now, don't go do this. So let's say you're a junior scientist and you're at home alone with your sister's cat. That cat would become a science experiment. And let's just say, I read it somewhere, that you take that cat and you flip it around and throw it in the air, it'll always land on its feet. How does it do that? Because it has a very well-developed cerebellum. Okay? Now, if you have a linoleum floor, you could spin that cat around until you spun the cerebellum where it can't see straight and then throw it up. The landing wasn't quite so good. Okay, I got beat for it. Okay, so anyway, I put cat part of the brain to kind of remember that it's fine motor control. Good? This says coordinates fine, tunes the skeletal muscle movements. Stores memory of how to move. Can you forget that? I remember this time I was playing softball for a church league. Yes, I played softball and I played for a church league. And I normally played infield, but they were missing an outfielder, so I went to the outfield. And it had been a long time since I shagged. Shagged means, this is what shag means here in baseball. Fly balls. Okay, I caught fly balls. This guy hit one out and played left field, and I was running. And as I was running, the ball was bouncing in the sky because my cerebellum had forgotten the memory of how to even that out. Okay. I realized it was happening. So after the game, I had somebody hit me some fly balls and I kept running and running and running. Pretty soon, those undulations became smooth. Got it? So you can kind of forget that. You got to dust it off. Okay, so much for that. Anyway, it says stores memory of previously learned movement patterns. Okay, just told you that. Adjust skeletal muscle to maintain equilibrium and posture. We're going to do senses at the end of this nervous system, and I'll talk about equilibrium. And there's a part in your inner ear that's responsible for what they call not equilibrium, balance. And that's not the case. It's head orientation, because your head, when it moves, it tells the rest of your body you're moving to the side. Equilibrium and posture, remember 10%, we talked about this with muscle, about 10% of your muscles are constricted to give you posture. And I think we talked about somebody who is deceased trying to move them because that 10%'s gone. It's like trying to push jello uphill. Proprioception means you knowing where your limbs are at. I always do this one. I want you to not look, put your hand behind your head, point 2 fingers. Go ahead and do it. There's nobody watching you. Go ahead and do it. Bring it forward. Did you get it right? Well, how did you know that? You couldn't see it. How'd you know there was 2 fingers? There's a lot of things going on in that movement. One is sensory dendrites in your joints. Okay, and we're going to call that Golgi tendon, but we'll get to that later. Okay, that a learned response to how much 2 is, and proprioception, sensory stimuli in your body that let you know where your fingers and toes and things are at. Think, how do you walk at night with your eyes are shut when you're going to the bathroom and not falling? You know where the floor is at. How come? Proprioception. Do you understand what that is? Knowing where your appendages are at. Monitors position. I can't read this. Let me move this. Oh, muscle tone. Yeah, we talked about this guy, didn't we? Muscle tone. Yeah, hypertonia, hypotonia. Okay, there's really nothing more to say to that. The peduncles. It says 3 thick tracts that link the cerebellum to the brainstem. Superior, middle, and inferior. We've already talked about it 3 times. You can read it, pause it, write it down. We're going on. Limbic system. I call this the Hollywood system. Okay? Okay, I'm done. Throw it in the trash. That was my lunch. Okay. My mom would hit me or stab me with a fork if I tried to talk with food in my mouth. And I know she's lurking in this room somewhere. Okay, the limbic system is a series of nuclei that are connected around the base stem, the stem of the brain. I showed you a picture of it. They were dark colored. Remember that? And those are connected like arms. And they're connected with special nuclei. Nuclei for hunger and odor. We already did these. And sound and colors. All of those things, all are stored memories. You got to have the memory first, and it's got to be stored in those nuclei. And then you connect those arms so they can communicate with one another, and they elicit emotion. So I call it the Hollywood system. You're not going to see it anyplace else, but this is how I remember it. The Notebook. I just watched that sucker the other night. Again, I've only watched it once. But I doubt you've seen it. But it's about this woman who has Alzheimer's and starts with dementia. And she kind of drifts back into reality and back out of reality and so forth. And James Garner's her husband, and he's reading her a book. And what it shows is how people drift in and out of dementia, and then when it's full-blown Alzheimer's, they just can't remember squat. And when they get to a scene, they want you to feel bad, feel sorry, feel sad. They dim the lights, the volume goes down, the colors become more, not vivid, more dilute, okay? And pretty soon you feel yourself, your eyes starting to sweat, okay? I also watched another movie with Sylvester Stallone and the Expendables. Hey, there wasn't any dim lights there. Trust me. And there was a lot of fighting and stuff going on. Got you all pumped up, which is why some people like action movies. Okay. At the very end of the movie, James Garner dies with his wife. He has his arm wrapped around her. They're holding hands. And they die together. Okay. And I didn't, because I don't have those feelings, but you're crying like a baby. Why? Why? It's just picture and music and sound and color. Because the people that design these movies They want you to cry, or they want you to be happy, or they want you to go get popcorn, or they want something, and they know which one of those nuclei to buzz. The limbic system, you get it? Okay? It's a whole bunch of nuclei hooked together to give you emotion. Ring around the diencephalon. Process and experience emotions. Affects memory of sensation and emotional states. You were born on a abandoned island, and as soon as you're born, mom goes, and you have to survive on this island for yourself. You're 20 years old. You watch a movie for the very first time in your life, and it's the friggin' Notebook. Are you going to cry? No. You're not going to have any stored emotions. You won't know what that means. Do you understand? Post learn response. That's what that's telling you. Anyway. Components of the limbic system. Remember I said there was some nuclei I wanted you to do it with. This is the second time you've seen cingulate. Okay. Cingulate nuclei. Hippocampal. Hippocampal gyrus. Hippocampus. Hippocampus. Okay. Long-term memory comes out of the hippocampus. Amygdaloid. Okay. Fear, emotion. Okay. Fear and emotion, amygdaloid, also anger. Okay, you throw in the olfactory system, which is smell, and you get that is just, I listed 5 of them. Okay, those are your limbic system. Also, you can also throw in other ones, the ones for hunger and for thirst. Those are all part of the limbic system. Good. Now, what I've done with this photo is it shows the color, and some of these shows some of the nuclei. So I'm trying to get this to go. Nuclei, 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 nuclei. See them? And they're all connected. And they're connected. It looks like they're connected up and down, superior and inferior, and then posterior and rostral, but it's not. It's actually completely all the way around. Okay, the last segment. Cranial nerves. There's 12 cranial nerves. Now, mark this down. There's 3 things you're going to have to remember to the cranial nerves. I'm going to ask you 5 questions on the exam. You ready? Cranial nerves are denoted 1 through 12 Roman numerals. So, you know, Roman numerals are 1 with the top on it like this. Roman numerals 2 with a top and bottom on it. Then 3, and then 4 is a single line with a V after it. Okay. Okay. That means 4. 5 is a V. Okay. Those are your Roman numerals. And you're going to go up to 12. When you get to 10, it's an X. You're going to need to know the Roman numeral. Hang on. The dog went barking. I got to go find out why. Okay, that meant nothing. Don't worry about it. Okay, it was a spaceship landing on my front lawn. Now, cranial nerves, you have to know the Roman numeral, you have to know the name, and you have to know general function. So number 1 is olfactory, sense of smell. Number 2, optic, vision. 3, ocular motor, moves the eyeball, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think, pretty sure that in one of the slides coming up, I have this little thing I drew, and it kind of helps you in understanding and memorizing the cranial nerves. But remember, I'll say cranial nerve number, I'll just go cranial nerve V, which is number 5. You have to know that's the trigeminal. I'll say trigeminal, and it'll have the answers V, maybe 3, maybe 10, and you got to know it's V, 5. I may say moves the eyeball, and I may have names, or I may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see what I mean? So you got to know them all. And there's a mnemonic. So what I want you to do is I want you to go on the computer, under Google, type in mnemonics, cranial nerves. Mnemonics, that's spelled Mnemonics, mnemonics, cranial nerves. And they'll give you a list of them. And they're little jingles. Remember we talked about mnemonics? Boys say girls like chocolate, okay? Never let monkeys eat bananas. Those are all mnemonics. Well, this one's for 12. I didn't get to do the ones for the wrist. Okay, those are kind of funny. But anyway, you pick out one. Now, when I was in your shoes, the one that everybody used was on Olympus towering tops, a Finn and German viewed some hops. Now, that is stupid. That means nothing. That is stupid. However, I remembered it. And then I just used the first letter of what that mnemonic was, and I could remember the cranial nerves. Except for on Olympus towering tops. Man, I had 3 O's and 2 T's right out of the gate, and you had to remember those. I get it, but it's a learning tool. Okay, so do you understand? You're going to get 5 questions. Don't blow it off. That says 12 pairs Roman numerals. Anterior is number 1. Names generally related to function a little bit. Cranial nerves. Here they are. Here's a dissected one, okay, where you can see the cranials here as if they were drawn. Here's a table. See, it says olfactory. Let me get this. Olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, and all the way down to hypoglossal, which is number 12. And it says if it's sensory, if it's motor, or it's autonomic. You don't need to know that. All you need to know is it's only going to be one of these. So sensory, olfactory is sensory. So it falls under smell. Optic is vision, falls under smell. See how it says none and none? Okay, so I want the general functions of those. You got it? Okay. Hang tight. I'm going to turn this on pause. I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you that thing I want you to, is a learning tool. Okay, so let me go over to here. Good, 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 good. Pause. Okay, I said I had this little learning tool. I'm just going to pop it in here. It's going to cut out part of me, but you're not going to worry about that. Okay, do you see this right here? These are your cranial nerves. Kind of draw a 7 backwards and forwards. Put 8 for the ears. 5 is trigeminal. 1 is olfactory. 2 is optic. 3 moves the eyes, ocular motor. 4 is still moves the eyes. 5 trigeminal. 6 is your cheeks. 7 is facial. And then you see 9, 10, and 12 deal with your tongue and chewing and speech. 11 is your shoulders. Okay, so there they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That kind of puts you in the ballpark. I'm going to get rid of this. That kind of gets you in the ballpark of where those are. Okay? You're going to need to know those. I mean, if you don't want to, that's fine. There's 5 questions. Hold on. Damn. Okay? So this will conclude this. I'll get these uploaded. And then the next one I'll do will be on the spinal cord and spinal nerves. Then we'll do the autonomics. So you got 2 more. And then we'll go back to directed teaching. Okay? As far as the labs for this are concerned, they're already posted. One is on the brain. There's a key for the brain. That's all it is. It's a key for the brain. You got to go through the pictures and you're going to look at the brain. The other one is the spinal cord. There's 2 spinal cords, one on a wooden stand, one is on a plastic stand, and you're going to need to know those. Okay, that's going to be it for the nervous system. Okay, talk to you later.